Good morning. My name is Michael Martin, and welcome to today's New York State Archives presentation of the basics of maintaining your inactive storage. Today's presenters are Monica Hawk-Wilton, who is the Records Advisory Officer for counties and miscellaneous governments, as well as Arthur Siegel, who is part of State Agency at Scheduling and Services. This session is being recorded and will be available for future viewing. If you have any questions, please type them in the chat feature to the right side of your screen, and we will answer them at the end of the presentation. And now I turn the presentation over to Monica.
Thanks, Michael. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar. As Michael stated, I'm Monica, and during this session, my colleague Arthur and I are going to delve into the basics of maintaining your inactive record storage spaces. This session will focus on storage of physical media, primarily paper, and will not provide significant content about managing and organizing electronic records stored on computers, networks, or servers. While there's some overlap between methodologies used for physical and electronic records, there are also significant differences, and we wanted to keep the focus of this session fairly tight because of the limited time available. If you're storing electronic content on external media like CDs, DVDs, computer tape, maybe some diskettes that you've had since the 80s or 90s, some of the content within this webinar might be relevant to you, but I ask you, please contact State Archive staff in either state agency services or local government services for guidance, as not every format is appropriate for long-term storage of electronic records, and the conditions tolerated by paper records can be detrimental to other media types. If you're interested in storing audiovisual materials, this webinar can be helpful, but you're also going to want to watch the session named Introduction to Audiovisual Records. Michael, can you put a link in the chat for that, please? And we will watch the chat for that. Speaking of other resources, most of the content in this session can also be found in two different state archives publications. One named Guidelines for Storage of Inactive Government Records, and the other called Administration of Inactive Records. So if you're like me and you like to read things and watch a webinar, you're going to want to visit our website and pull those publications, which, like all of our publications, are free. And Michael will put the links for that in the chat as well. With that, let's delve into the webinar. We're going to start our session by discussing why you might want to utilize separate storage spaces for your active and inactive records. Next, we'll cover the characteristics of appropriate versus, let's say, questionable record storage spaces, including the types of shelving that you should be using. After that, we'll talk about how to utilize your record storage space to ensure that content remains accessible and usable and can be found quickly, and that it's protected from inappropriate access or destruction. Finally, we'll provide tips on how to ensure that your record storage spaces remain a safe and appropriate location throughout the record's retention periods, which could be 5 years, 10 years, 50 years, or for permanent records, forever. One of the most important considerations that you should reflect on today, and when you're thinking about establishing record storage spaces, is the fact that if you're going to maintain access to the information within records, you need to ensure that the environments in which you're storing the records is appropriate given the format in which the information is memorialized, paper, electronic, on CD, whatnot. The obligation to retain records is, in reality, an obligation to ensure that the information within the records remains accessible for the full retention period. And if the records are going to help you meet your administrative needs and your fiscal and legal obligations, you have to ensure that they're stored such that you're going to be able to retain access to them and that the records are going to retain their informational value. The wrong conditions can lead to unreadable records, or records that are contaminated, or records that are misplaced. Appropriate storage processes are going to help you minimize each of these risks. Before we get too far into things, what do we mean by inactive records? Well, government records are a means of documenting information about government activities or constituent concerns, right? And you want to make sure they're available for future reference. Usually, The information within records is most important for day-to-day business or gets accessed most frequently when it's first created or received. We tend to refer to this as the active use period. Once we get through that phase, we often have to retain the information within records for future reference, but we don't necessarily need to access it very often or very quickly. This is what we call the inactive phase. Almost all records spend part of their lifespan in the inactive phase. And although storage spaces and processes for permanent records, which spend centuries or in active storage, may differ in ways from those for documents with relatively short retention periods, many of the processes are pretty close to identical. So whether it's a record you keep for 6 years or a record you keep for 600, you're going to want to consider whether inactive storage is appropriate rather than keeping things all stored in the same location, regardless of how often staff need to touch them. As with, many things with records management, there are many reasons to consider, storing inactive records in specifically designed and selected spaces. For example, maintaining separate storage spaces helps ensure compliance. By moving inactive records to a space designated for and limited to their storage, you're creating an opportunity for records management staff to be more involved in their management and for those staff to implement standardized description and tracking of those records. At a record storage facility, you can require that each box of records be packed and described such that it's easy to determine when records can be destroyed, instead of having to guess. And once you have that information, you can create tools to track the destruction authorizations. This will greatly reduce the chances of records being destroyed prematurely or inadvertently retained for far longer than necessary. Maintaining separate storage spaces also helps provide efficient access. If the records are consolidated and described in a clear and consistent manner, and their locations within the record storage areas are either standardized or tracked, identifying and providing access to the desired content should be fairly quick and easy. You'll also increase the likelihood that all responsive content will be made available, ensuring that staff have access to the content they need to do their jobs, so they can perform analysis or make determinations or respond to information requests based upon the best available information. Easy availability also supports transparency goals. When it's quick and easy to retrieve records, and when you're able to identify all records responsive to a specific query, it's going to be much simpler to respond to public service requests, FOIL requests, discovery demands, subpoenas, audits, all those things that keep us up at night. Prompt and complete responses can help maintain or improve your government's public image and can be cited when documenting that staff are dedicated to meeting their information transparency obligations. It's also worth considering using inactive storage because maintaining separate storage also saves money. And none of us have more, money that we're trying to find ways to throw it around. Office space is expensive. This nice spaces where people sit, where we have, pretty wallpaper, perhaps, where we have comfortable seating, should be reserved for staff and the records that we access frequently. If we relocate records that we don't have to touch very often to warehouses or other buildings or rooms that, while they're safe and climate controlled, aren't really aesthetically pleasing, we can reduce the cost of doing business because specialized record storage spaces, not only do they tend to be less expensive than more traditional office spaces, but they can be laid out in ways that increase the volume of records that are being stored within a given space. You can use a smaller footprint to store more records, which reduces the amount of space you need and thus the amount of space you're paying for. So Arthur, do you want to talk a bit about how to evaluate a space, how to determine where you should keep your inactive records?
Sure. Thanks, Monica. Before you can take advantage of any of the benefits that Monica was talking about, you first have to lay the groundwork by choosing and evaluating a potential storage space. So what are the important factors that go into this? Next slide, please. Well, first you need to determine where that space is going to be. What kind of structure or building are we talking about? There are 5 possibilities for inactive record storage sites. The first are rooms within an existing facility. Here we're talking about storing the records in the same facility that houses active records. This often involves the use of existing storage rooms, basements, or attics. It's the simplest solution and is the one that we'll examine in detail. You could also look for a separate building, either owned, rented, or leased. This is a less convenient option than storage on site, though it does tend to cost less than some of the other options we'll talk about. For state agencies, the State Record Center is a good option. I won't get into it here since we have information about the Record Center on our website and in a separate webinar, but it does offer a low cost and relatively convenient storage option as well. There's also new construction. This is probably the most expensive option and the most difficult to manage. It also requires putting off proper storage until the construction is complete. There's commercial storage, such as in a facility like Iron Mountain. This can potentially be expensive, though, when you consider that commercial facilities often charge not just for storage, but for other services as well, such as retrieval. State agencies should take note that this is one distinction between a commercial facility and the State Record Center, which only charges a flat fee for storage. Easy accessibility of records might also be an issue with a commercial storage option. Then there's also the option of a facility that's shared with another government or agency. If you can set this up, it could be pretty helpful to share costs and space, but it's not always easy to set up that kind of an agreement. Here's what you need to remember though. There's no right or wrong approach. Each organization must evaluate its needs, resources, available space in existing buildings, and potential space that could be developed. Always remember too that whatever space you choose should be a records-only space. Storage should not be shared with cleaning supplies or holiday decorations or anything that isn't an inactive record. These not only take up space, but they could potentially pose a hazard depending on what it is. For example, chemical supplies or food, which can attract rodents or vermin. So if any of that's in there, remove it. Next slide, please. So let's assume you've found a potential space to store your records. The next thing you'll need to do is check the physical structure to make sure that it's viable. You'll want to get certain people involved to help do this, such as building and fire inspectors, a general contractor, engineers, and perhaps even architects. They can all evaluate foundations, roofs, and windows, determine whether a structure is vulnerable to floods or fires, and identify the probable presence of hazardous materials, for example, asbestos, mold, or lead paint. They can also do things like evaluate risks associated with pipes running through the facility, determine the existence of fire hazards, and examine HVAC systems, electrical wiring, and plumbing. We have a facilities checklist in our publication, Guidelines for Storage of Inactive Records, to help you evaluate your current or potential inactive records sites. This checklist, which can be found on our website, will cover everything you need to ensure you don't miss anything. It's also important to consider space requirements when choosing a facility. Determine the number of cubic feet of inactive records you have, and always allow for at least 30% of additional space for future growth when developing a new space. Details regarding how to calculate space needs can also be found in the inactive record storage guidelines I noted earlier. Next slide, please. A good storage space starts with a healthy environment. So what is the ideal environment to keep records? Here are what we consider the optimal conditions for storing records, as well as for the people who work in inactive records storage facilities. The temperature should fall between a uniform 65 and 72 degrees Fahrenheit. Relative humidity should fall within a range of 40 to 55%. Low humidity like that reduces the presence of mold. Temperatures and humidity, I should point out, should have minimal fluctuations because continuous expansion and contraction can make paper brittle and cause the deterioration of things like film. So it's always important to make sure that you keep a constant monitoring of the temperature and the humidity levels to make sure that they're not fluctuating too much. The area should be clean and free from dust, insects, and mold. Install air filters if needed to cut down on the amount of particulates. There should also be good air circulation to reduce humidity and mold. This is to provide a healthy environment for both the records and any staff using the facility. To do this, you may need to install ductwork if the room doesn't have any. Records should also not be exposed to direct light. If a storage area has windows, install shades or blinds, or better, close off the windows entirely. Lights can also have ultraviolet filters added when left on constantly. And make sure that you equip the facility for fire prevention. Familiarize yourself with local fire codes and regulations, and install smoke detectors, fire extinguishers, and a fire suppression system where needed. Next slide, please. Like environment, security for your inactive storage area is also vital. So you'll need to restrict access to authorized personnel only. No one should deposit or remove records without authorization, and make sure you document who has direct access to record storage. Install locks and limit the distribution of keys, key cards, or swipe cards. You can also install a security door that requires a code for entrance. If you do, change the code occasionally to enhance security. If possible, though this is certainly not always practical, install a security alarm. And cameras can also add an additional layer of security. For all these security needs, you'll likely need to have support from your management in order to avoid conflicts with staff who might want or expect unfettered access, especially if you're enforcing limited access for the first time. Next slide, please. The last piece to consider about the physical inactive storage space is the shelving arrangement. Proper shelving is every bit as important as the storage area itself, and choosing units wisely will help your government or agency use space efficiently and avoid frustration, while choosing incorrectly will cause its own problems. So here are our recommendations. You'll need to install heavy-duty steel shelving, preferably 18 gauge or lower. The smaller the gauge number, the stronger the shelving. Over time, weaker shelves may buckle under weight. You'll need to calculate the weight capacity needs of your records and choose shelves that meet or exceed them. Your shelves need to be able to manage a lot of weight. The estimated weight of a standard record storage box when full is about 35 pounds. So multiply that times the number of boxes you expect to have on a shelving unit. Because of all this weight, and to make them more secure, you may want to consider anchoring the shelves to the wall or to the floor to avoid the potential for tipping. You also need to completely avoid wooden shelving, as these are not as strong and the wood is subject to off-gassing, which will jeopardize the records over time. The appropriate height for shelving will depend on your record storage needs and the size of your records storage facility. Standard heights range from 5 to 10 feet, with 3 or 4 inches added to keep the bottom shelf off the floor. Shelving 6 or 7 feet high is the most common, so make sure you have step stools and ladders available also. Always allow for at least 1 foot between the cartons on the top shelves and the lighting fixtures or ductwork. You don't want that stuff running into each other. And sprinkler heads should be at least 1.5 feet above the cartons to allow the sprinklers to distribute water evenly. You also need to plan for at least 3 feet of aisle space between shelves to meet OSHA requirements to make sure people can get through easily. And now I'm going to turn things back over to Monica.
Thanks, Arthur. So now that we know how to select a space for storing your inactive records and which shelves to procure, how do you make sure that you can quickly locate and provide access to the content you need? To be successful, you're going to want to have standardized processes for how records are boxed, how those boxes are labeled, how labels are transferred between the office and the storage facility, and how the records are arranged once they've arrived at the storage facility. You'll also want to develop a system for locating individual boxes. When selecting boxes, it's worth paying for the good boxes. This is not where you try to save money. And by good boxes, I mean sturdy boxes. Boxes that are made with double-walled cardboard that aren't going to distend over time due to the weight of the records or whose handles are going to rip out when you pick up the box. And you don't want the boxes that rip when you put them together. I have dealt with these boxes. It's really worth paying the extra, portion of $1 per box to get the good boxes. Please note, though, that when I talk about the good boxes, I don't necessarily mean archival storage boxes, the ones that are advertised as acid-free or buffered. Those might be a great choice for your permanent records, but they're typically not required for limited term storage records. Letter or legal records, the ones that fit into a normal filing cabinet, should be stored in cubic foot boxes measuring approximately 15 inches by 10 inches by 12 inches. These boxes are going to fit easily on the shelves that Arthur described, and when filled with paper, as Arthur said, they weigh about 35 pounds. That means that they're an appropriate weight both for storing on the shelves and for staff to be able to move safely. One thing to keep in mind, those boxes, which weigh 35 pounds normally, could weigh 50 pounds if you have a records disaster and they get soaked. So you're going to want to make sure that you don't pick larger boxes, because 50 pounds, the shelves can support. 50 pounds, your staff can probably move safely. If you're using larger boxes, they might lead to collapsing shelves. They might lead to staff injuries. These are both things that we all obviously want to avoid. For oversized boxes, if you don't have storage devices or space to store them flat, you're going to want to roll them and place them in sturdy oblong boxes that are slightly longer than the rolled records. The width and depth of the box should be equal to one another, and you should be able to put the roll in without squishing it, and you don't want to leave too much room for the roll to go back and forth through the box, damaging itself as you're moving the box. I've had really good luck in the past with 6 by 6 by 36 inch boxes. Pretty easy for me to lift, and I'm not exactly, a weightlifter. But if you can't split up your rolls for, functional reasons, an 8 by 8 by 36 box should also be manageable by most staff and most shelving units. The great thing about using boxes rather than rolls to store your rolled records is that you should be able to fit them on the shelves. You should be able to stack multiple boxes on the shelves. And they'll, basically stay in place, stay organized so that staff can find them quickly and easily. When you're packing records into boxes, you're going to want to limit each box to one record series and one retention period. Doing so will remove the need to weed the contents of individual boxes and reduce the chances of inadvertently destroying records before their time or retaining records far beyond the assigned disposition date. And it reduces the likelihood that you'll be filling your shelves with boxes whose contents over time are winnowed down to just a few inches of records, which means that you're wasting an awful lot of space that could be used for other records. If your box is only partially full, you're going to want to fill it with either a DIY spacer or one you purchase, or even just some crumpled paper so that the records stand up straight. You want to make sure that they're not creasing, crushing, sliding, or warping, because you want the records to be legible when you need to access them. If for some reason you can't fill a box halfway or 2/3 of the way full with a single series, you just don't have enough records of that series retention period, talk to State Archive staff. We can help you strategize on a different process for identifying what's in the box and making sure space is used efficiently. If staff are pulling records from a filing cabinet to put in a record storage box, they might be tempted to just grab the hanging file folder that you're using in the filing cabinet and plunk it straight in the box. Please don't do that. As someone who's moved a lot of boxes over the time, I know that the little hooks on those hanging files can scratch your fingers, they can cut your fingers, and they can also be a problem for the box itself. They can distend the box so that it doesn't fit as nicely on the shelving. It's more likely to fail over time. And even if the box is in perfect shape, you're going to have to remove the folders before you shred the records. And that takes staff time that you don't necessarily need to spend if people remove the folders before they put the records in the boxes. So what if you just take the hangers out of the folders? Well, it means that the folders are still taking valuable space in the box. More importantly, it means that you can't use the folders to store active records. If you're making the choice between continually buying more hanging folders and just pulling the records out of the folders and putting them in the box, you're probably going to want to go for the latter option. Similar logic can be applied to binders. Storing records in binders isn't as space efficient as packing them loose. And when it comes to time to destroy the records, staff are going to need to remove the pages from the binders. So basically, you're pushing off the responsibility to take the stuff out of the binders to a future time when you're probably going to be getting rid of a lot more records and having to do processing that you might not have time for. So you're better off in most circumstances taking the records out of the binder before you put them in the box. There's also the fact, like the hanging file folders, that staff probably need binders for active records. And if you don't want to keep buying new binders, you probably don't want to be storing them in records boxes for 6, 10, 50, 100 years. Remember how I was talking about oversized records? And about how if you can't store them flat, you're going to want to roll them? That means that you're not going to want to fold them and put them in your cubic foot boxes, even if they're associated with other records that are legal or letter sized. And that's because not only is it space inefficient, but folded records are more difficult to use. You're not going to be able to get them to lay flat very easily, and you're not going to be able to see the details as clearly. And because of the fold line, you're going to have areas of weakness in that document where they're more likely to tear or fray, or the information is likely to fade. And these are all things you want to avoid. And finally, if you have too much to comfortably put in one box, split it between 2 boxes. Putting too much in the box means the box will distend, especially if it gets wet and the records grow in size, pushing at the boundaries of the box. If the box is overfull, it's also nearly impossible to remove or refile pages without damaging them. And since overstuffed boxes are heavier, staff are more likely to injure themselves when they're moving over full boxes. So once you have your records boxes, you're going to have to label them. And you're going to want to have a procedure for how you do that, as silly as that sounds. Because your goal with the labels is to contain all the information necessary for staff to identify the box and retrieve the content quickly. And you're going to want to be able to look at the box and determine quickly whether that box needs to be retained or whether it can be gotten rid of. This information should be listed in specific locations on each box. You do not want staff having to spend more than the briefest moment looking for information on the box. It's, a waste of time. Uniformity is going to make it quick and accurate for staff to identify things. And uniformity and having a procedure means that information is less likely to be omitted. So you're not going to have to go back to unit staff to figure out what's in the box. You're not going to have to go through the contents of the box to figure out what's in the box. One easy way to increase consistency in how boxes are labeled is to create a template or pre-printed labels. While there are times that simply writing content on the box in permanent marker is appropriate, creating a word processor template or a sticky label for staff to use increases the chances that required information will be included on the label and that each detail is located in the preferred location. If you're using pre-printed labels, you're going to want to invest in the ones that aren't going to curl up and fall off the box when humidity in the record storage facility fluctuates. Self-adhesive foil-back labels are probably your best bet. They're more likely to stay stuck. But self-adhesive labels that aren't foil-backed are still going to be better than gummed labels. They're pretty prone to just, falling off. If you tape over labels or tape over printouts from a word processor document, you're going to want to not print over any barcodes or QR codes if you're using glossy tape, because that's going to reflect the light from any scanning device you're using and make those barcodes or QR codes pretty useless. All labels should be printed using waterproof ink or toner in case you have a water issue in the record center. And if you want to use records boxes without peeling off or crossing out outdated labels, you can use plastic label holding sleeves. Again, foiled backed is less likely to fall off than those that aren't foiled back. Regardless of how the label is affixed to the box, you should ensure that it contains the details necessary to identify the contents. This might be as little as a unique identification number that can be cross-referenced against a database or a list. Or you might want a more complex label, which has the name of the record owning unit, the record series title and number, the date range, a meaningful description of the records, like a list of contractor case numbers, and the disposition date. If you have a large storage facility or are concerned about preventing inappropriate access, you might want to include fewer details. If you're utilizing a storage facility owned and operated by another entity, they might have their own established label format by which you need to abide. As records management staff are the gatekeepers for the record storage facility, whether you operate it yourself or simply oversee transfer to your government's records to a third party provider, you get to approve or decline records for transfer. You get to determine when they're transferred, and you get to establish a procedure under which they're being transferred. You get to choose to accept only well-described, appropriately boxed inactive records, and you get to decline those that aren't, meeting set criteria. You can say that people aren't allowed to just drop and run and not give you the information you need to manage the records. You can also say that they can't give you duplicates. They can't give you non-records. They need to weed content before they give it to you. And you can schedule certain days and times for accepting drop-offs or pickups. As the person who is running the records management program or operating the records management program, you do have a lot of wiggle room to say what you do and don't accept. And you should memorialize these rules somewhere, whether you're managing your own facility or you're coordinating the transfer back and forth to a third-party facility. Regardless of whether you're running your own facility or using a third-party facility, you're going to want to develop and require the use of a transfer form. Both records management staff and those within the record owning units should have access to a list created by the record owning unit of the records within each box transferred. The retention item and disposition date should be on the list, and it's usually a good idea to include the date range of the records, since that helps determine the retention and disposition dates. The box descriptions on the transfer list should include any information that you'd put on a box label, plus whatever additional information is necessary to clarify the box's contents. The list should be detailed and have, talk about the documents or within each box, but it doesn't necessarily need to list each document or folder. For example, if you have a case file and it takes multiple boxes to store the single case file, you should list the case number on each of the boxes and the types of record in each box. So instead of having to pull all the boxes related to that case, staff can identify the one box that contains the records they need and simply pull that box. Copies of the transfer list, can be basically whatever you need it, but we do have a sample of what the State Record Center uses on our Forms and Tools page. It's a great resource when you're trying to devise your own form for describing records. Michael, can you and it looks like you already posted it for me. Thank you very much. Once you have your shelves and you've got your boxes and you've got your boxes labeled, you got to figure out how you're going to put your boxes on your shelves. There's no one right way to do this. You might want to organize the boxes by record series, like keep all your purchase orders together. Or you might want to designate a space for each department's or unit's records. Or you might want to come up with something a little more complex, like if you have planning department records, you might want to organize them by geographic location. One potential issue with each of these methodologies, though, is that they work best for records with a steady turnover rate. If you have records that need to be retained for 6 years, and the volume of new records created in 2026 equals the volume scheduled for destruction in 2026, then you're all set. But what if the number of records per year is increasing over time? Or what if you start retaining records given to a certain process electronically? Within a few years, the amount of space set aside in the record storage space may be insufficient for one record type and far exceed what's needed for another. And at that point, you're either going to need to shift all the records to distribute space appropriately, designate secondary storage spaces for record types that have exceeded their allotted spaces, or revise your storage methodology. This could be a fairly simple process if you have a small record storage area, but if you have a large volume of records and a large record storage area, it could be an absolute nightmare. If you think that that's going to be your experience, that it is going to turn into something just very overwhelming, you might want to consider not using a strict filing scheme and instead placing boxes based upon space availability. This no rhyme or reason approach has two significant benefits. First, when weeding records in open spaces, you can place any new box in the same size in that space, regardless of the type of records that it contains or the unit that owns them. Space opens up, you put a box in it, you document it. There's also the fact that distributing records across the entire storage area makes it difficult for those not familiar with the space to identify and access protected content. Like if all the personnel records are together, I can walk right over to the personnel records. If the personnel records are scattered all over the place, I'm not going to be able to find the box I'm looking for unless I'm authorized to find that box. You may also want to consider which records will be most difficult to replace if they're damaged in a disaster and locate them accordingly. For example, the records that are vital to your operations and for which no backup copies exist should be located away from potentially drippy pipes, fire suppression sprayers, and the windows that could leak or put in too much UV light. They should also be high enough off the floor so that if you do have water infiltration that's more than a few inches, they're less likely to get soaked. But regardless of how you arrange your boxes, you should assign location IDs to the shelving units or the shelves, say row, unit, shelf space, and label as appropriate. This makes it easy to memorialize the fact that box number 12345, which contains payroll records from 2024, is in location row 5, unit 2, shelf 1, and space 3. The complexity of the shelving code doesn't need to be that much though. You can say that based upon the size and set up your storage area, you really only need to number each space. You can have 5 shelving units all over the place, but really only have box space 1, box space 2, yada, 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 and not have to distinguish between the shelves, the rows, or anything else. You pick what works best for you. But whatever system you use, whether you're numbering the rows, whether you're numbering the shelving units, whether you're simply numbering the spaces, you're going to have a plan for how to identify which box is in which space. It can be fairly simple. I mean, technically, you could just have an inventory in a notebook written out longhand. But the problem with that is it means that you don't have any backup copies of your inventory, which means that if you have a disaster or if somebody misplaces it, you can conceivably lose all information you have about what content is in which box in what location, which is going to, be terrible. And that's why a digital system is almost always the right way to go. Your system could be as easy as a word processor document, which you can back up and share. Plus you have keyword searching, which is something you didn't have in that notebook. A step up from that would be a spreadsheet. If you turn your spreadsheet into a table, it's going to be really easy to filter content for copying and pasting into rudimentary reports. When I was a records management officer, I did a lot of work with spreadsheet tables, but they don't do everything. And if you need something more robust, and especially if you want to run complex reports, a database might be a great option. There's actually a sample database from the state archives that's available on our Forms and Tools page. But sometimes you want something a bit more. You just want more functionality, in which case specialized records management software might be the way to go. But the problem is, with additional functionality comes additional cost. So, consider your options, talk to state archive staff about your specific situation, and consider what meets your needs for the most appropriate cost. So Arthur, once we have the boxes on shelves and labeled and we know where everything is, how do we make sure that we can retain them and access them long term?
Thanks, Monica. Um, so we've talked about how to manage the transfer and retrieval of records in your storage space. So we're going to turn now to long-term maintenance of those records. This maintenance is vital to the health of your records and will make future management and retrieval much easier. Think of it as kind of like giving your car regular maintenance checks. Next slide, please. So once your space has been properly organized, regular purging is perhaps the most important maintenance activity you can perform. This ensures the long-term health of your storage space by improving access and maintaining organization while making room for new records without the worry of unfettered growth. It's kind of like a fast-growing hedge. It needs to be regularly trimmed, otherwise it's going to grow out of control. Ideally, you've identified record series in your retention schedules and marked the retention periods on the boxes for easy identification. Having done that, it should be easy to go through and cull the records or boxes that have reached the appointed disposal dates. You can also arrange boxes so that those eligible for upcoming destruction are kept separately from those that have longer to go. So choose the appropriate method of destruction. This will usually be shredding or bonded recycling. State agencies can use our waste paper recycling contract to dispose of records, and you can find more detailed information about this on our website. It's also important to keep track of what has been disposed of. In a sense, good record keeping requires good record keeping, so putting in a small amount of effort on the front end by regularly recording what was destroyed and when can save a lot of time down the road looking for records that no longer exist. And having documentation that records were destroyed according to an authorized schedule also means you don't have to worry about lawsuits accusing you of purposefully trying to avoid providing responses to things like FOIL or litigation or audits. Being able to show a history of routine destruction provides evidence that you're not just destroying records willy-nilly. And finally, and kind of related to that, it's good practice to document who authorized the destruction, so you always have a record of this that you can point back to. Next slide, please. But despite your best efforts, there's always the risk of your records being subject to a disaster, whether it's a flood or burst pipe, fire, or something else. While you can't completely eliminate the risk, you can significantly reduce the impact of a disaster to your inactive storage space if you actively work to anticipate and prevent them. A strong disaster management plan will help you do this and by avoiding or managing events that can threaten, damage, or destroy your records. But first, you'll need to decide who's going to be responsible for writing your organization's disaster plan. If you don't have the time or expertise, or if you prefer to use an objective outside expert, you can hire a consultant to prepare the plan for you. You can also write the plan in-house. If you do, first form a planning team that includes your records manager and, if possible, staff from IT, facilities maintenance, finance, planning and development, and others. I won't go into details here since we do have a publication available on our website that provides an in-depth description of how to develop a disaster plan and what it entails. But among other things, a good plan should entail what might be considered preventative maintenance that could help avoid or mitigate a disaster, such as regularly checking for leaks and mold and making sure fire prevention equipment is functioning properly. Remember, routine maintenance and regular inspection of your facility can potentially prevent a lot of headaches later on. You'll also want to review your plan periodically to make sure that it's up to date with current information on emergency contacts, individuals responsible for specific tasks, and emergency procedures. And don't forget, keep a copy of the disaster plan in the record storage area for ready access. You don't want to waste time during an emergency trying to remember where the plan is filed. Next slide, please. As important as all these things are, regular purging, disaster planning, proper transfer of records, etc., the key to ensuring that they continue to be practiced over time is to codify records management practices or policies and procedures in writing. Doing this will accomplish several things. It'll promote program permanence. Developing policies and procedures ensures that your successors will have an inactive records program to follow and will know what to do. Think of when you first started. Did you have something to follow or a person to rely on? It's always better to have something written down rather than having to rely strictly on institutional memory. Having a policy in place will also reinforce uniform practices. By establishing a set of rules, it makes it easier for staff to follow. It also makes staff turnover and transitions easier and smoother. You can't simply say, well, we just always did it this way. You'll have justifications for the choices that have been made. And people know that they can refer to the policies to determine what they need to do next. Having policies and procedures in place can also aid staff training by assisting new staff in learning how the program functions and reinforcing methods and procedures for new and established staff. If people become familiar with these from the beginning, then there'll be less confusion later on about what needs to be done. So, we recommend it with all new staff training and orientation. Having policies in place also clearly documents procedures by explaining all the way down to step-by-step records management processes. This is especially important for e-discovery issues or legal challenges, as it can provide details regarding the disposition of records and how they were managed. And finally, it establishes responsibilities by indicating who's supposed to do what functions and establishing the authority to do so. Basically, it spells out who you need to contact and when. Next slide, please. And of course, you can always find more information about inactive record storage areas in other ways. As we mentioned a number of times in the webinar, New York State Archives website is full of helpful information broken out by topic. You'll notice that we have a whole section of our website dedicated to managing your records. Similarly, we've also mentioned public State Archives publications, of which there are many. These are free and they cover many topics, and they're all available on our website as well as PDFs. Of course, you can attend State Archives workshops and webinars like this one, but others may also be helpful on other records management topics or ones that we've touched on here. And again, you can see our website for a list and a schedule of these, or you can go to our YouTube channel for more recordings as well. You can also contact your regional advisory officer if you're a local government, or the state agency services staff if you're a state agency. We can provide direct advice based on a review of your current condition, storage conditions, or assessment of your storage needs. For local governments, your records advisory officer can also work with you and provide guidance on how to prepare grant applications for inactive records. And finally, you can network with others who have set up and maintained an inactive records program and learn from their own experience. Next slide, please. So we're almost ready to wrap up, but before we do, here are some of the basic ideas we want you to be able to take away today. Records management is a living system where you and the records coexist in a symbiotic relationship. Inactive record storage is an important part of that system. But there's a lot of planning required to make a healthy and sustainable inactive record storage area. What are your records management needs? Do you want something in-house or off-site? What kind of equipment and infrastructure do you need to consider? Do you know how to transfer records, the process and forms needed, where to put them, and how to store them to ensure they will be safe and preserved? For your part, managing and storing these records will help you clear up chaos and clutter. You won't be tripping over records in your office. You won't be searching through boxes you could have gotten rid of years ago, or boxes that you had no idea what was in them. Avoiding chaos and clutter will also help dispose of records more easily, and that will help you free up and maintain available space as well. It will also help you quickly and easily access your records without wasting valuable time. You want access to be as easy as possible when you have time-sensitive things like FOIL requests. And finally, write it down. You want to write down what you do to transfer records to your inactive storage area. Step-by-step procedures makes things easier for others. This is important because not only does it make things clear to others, but also can still be around even after you're not. We want the records program to survive past a single retirement. Next slide, please. So let me say thank you for listening today, and we hope this has been helpful for you and easy to understand. And now I think we have some time for questions.
We have one question. Let me see, just go back here. Are all those units about shelving and all the details, is that in a publication?
The information about shelving is divided between two different publications. The information about which shelves to purchase is available in the guidelines for inactive government records, which I'm going to put a link in the chat. I'm going to try to put a link in the chat. There we are. And the information about different ways to identify your shelving so that you can memorialize in what location each box of records is. It can be found in Administration of Inactive Records, and I'll put that link down as well.
Okay, another question that came up. Are there any webinars, workshops specifically geared towards retention of school records?
The best place to go for that is the Records Advisory Officer who works specifically with schools, because I know that she has presented specifically to schools, to BOCES, about the types of records that they have and the specific retention requirements for those records. That contact information can be found within the list of local government advisory services staff, which I'll paste in the chat. Looks like we have a question about webinars or workshops about office retention schedules. I think we have one pre-recorded on the webinar page. Does that sound right, Michael?
It does. I believe we have one. You can check the YouTube channel. More questions? Where do we find the list of records that need to be kept for employees that leave?
Would those be personnel records, or would it simply be any records they left behind about the work they did?
Yes, personnel.
Well, it really depends on whether you're a state agency or a local government. If you're a local government, you should be able to consult item 636 in the retention schedule. But talk to your records advisory officer. We can help you parse things out.
Okay, another question is there a sample of a database for inactive records? And I shared that before, but I can share that again. We do have a sample on our website. And of course, we are getting many, many kudos and thank yous for everybody who's attending, and they're thanking our presenters as well. Are there any other questions? Oh, don't see. More thank yous. And we thank over 100 people who attended today as well. Okay. Looks like we're not getting any other questions. So just in case, want to make sure that people know if you have more than one person at your location that's participating in this webinar, please type in the number of participants in the chat box. The recording of the session will be available on our website and the New York State Archives YouTube page, hopefully as soon as possible. And we want to thank everyone for participating. One last chance for questions, and if not, we'll return you to your day.
Well, if there aren't any more questions, I just want to say thanks for attending, everyone, and don't be shy about contacting State Archives staff. We're here to help you address your records management challenges and determine your retention obligations, and we're all very nice. Please do contact us.
And there was a question about the YouTube page, and I can share that as well. And yes, this will be available to listen. As we said, we are recording this. Okay, so if there are no more questions, we thank everybody again. Arthur, anything you want to say?
No.
He said it all. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day, and hopefully we'll see you soon. Thank you.